Good morning. That's not a good start. Let's put it full screen. Good morning, everyone. How the devil are you doing? I'm going to say good morning to Jason Patrick 280, who's watching from Cheshire, UK. He's also watching from Instagram. Morning, Jason. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Mark Whiting is in the house as well. Morning, Mark. How are you doing, my friend? Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We've got some breaking news to bring to you in just a moment. I'm going to wait for the chat to kind of kick itself in. Forgive the outfit, but I'm preparing for my cruise, and all of my summer clothes have kind of popped to the top of the wardrobe. So, yeah, there you are. That's what we're doing today. Yes, breaking news. Let's have a bit of breaking news. Had this overnight, which you can see right there. This is not the official thing. I'll get to that in just a moment. The JCB Hydromax, which obviously we've been reporting on over the past few months, powered to 368.347 miles per hour on road to a FIA world record. The Hydromax Streamliner today clinched an SCTA speed record on the Bonneville Salt Flats. Driven by Wing Commander Andy Green, OBE, the car set a new record in the Southern California Timing Association blown glass streamliner class at Bonneville Flats. That was at 8:50 local time over in the States, but it is basically building up to a proper full-blown FIA world record attempt next week, but they are well on track. I think the Diesel Max topped out at just over 350 miles an hour, so they've already beaten that with the hydrogen version. So yes, they are very much on track for a new world record with the hydrogen car as well. So congratulations. Obviously, congratulations to Andy Green, who frankly is something of a legend. But congratulations on to everyone behind the scenes, the pit crew for JCB, who have basically turned an idea into record-breaking reality in about a year, which is an astonishing feat. It really is. We've got a video coming out about that, which we're going to borrow some of the language from JCB, who refer to it as their off-road to zero. That's what they're calling it. And basically, they from start to finish, it took them 12 months. 12 months ago, they decided, yes, we're going to go for this record. And then 12 months later, they were up at RAF Wittering, actually testing the car. And here we are a year and just a few days later, and they've already got one record in the can. So, yes, good morning to Mick Norton as well. And congrats to JCB. Yeah, and I realise it's all good PR. But I did actually say this to one of the guys at JCB. They don't need to do this. You know, they're already famous. They're already very wealthy. You know, they're already very well regarded. They don't need to do this. I love the pioneering spirit. This is kind of the Brits of old, if you ask me. You know, when we used to do things, you know, we endeavoured, we strived. We pushed, you know, we climbed mountains because they were there. We plumbed the depths of the oceans and we explored the skies. That's what Brits do, and this is just another example of precisely what Brits do. So JCB, thank you for making me feel very, very British this morning. We've got a packed show ahead, as always, for the final show of this week, and the countdown is already on as well. Don't forget, I'm here today, here Monday, here Tuesday, and then you're just going to have to manage without me for 2.5 weeks because I'm buggering off. Mercy Johnston is in our midst as well. Good morning, Mercy. Thank you very much indeed for being here. So, without further ado, we have a bit of a quorum of people here. How about we roll the intro and get this show on the road? It is Friday, as they say, 7th of August. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming, the authentic voice of the global demolition industry. And in today's show, Eagle swoops for Takeuchi. We've got some classic loaders from Bobcat, the future of site safety featuring Kobelco, and how do you fight fires in remote locations? I'm sure there are many answers to that question, but the first one is you call Prinoth. Yeah, that's what you do. In today's show, or in today's episode of Mark's Morning Monologue, the one-way street of recruitment, why demolition and construction bosses should lay their cards on the table when they're recruiting people. I'll explain all of that when we get to it. But we need to start off with a little bit of Caterpillar, and then we're going over to Eagle and Takeuchi after this. Very quickly, we've had Andy Darvell just walked in and basically said, morning, 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 everyone, which he always says, what a beautiful day. I agree. It is glorious out there. But he also said, what is the JCB news? You missed that. We started just a moment ago. Let me bring that to you again. I've still got it on my screen here. There we go. Share that, and you should be looking at that now. Yes, JCB. This is kind of an initial record breaker on the way to a bigger record breaker. Very quickly, just to recap, as part of the Speed Week over in Bonneville Flats in Utah, and they've taken the Hydromax up to 368.347 miles per hour, which is a new record, but that's all gearing up for the official FIA world record attempt next week. And I will recap very quickly. We are working on a video. It's almost done. Just got to do a few of the transitions and everything else. So I mean, obviously they've already broken a record, so regardless, my plan basically was to sit on the film until they'd actually blown the FIA world record, but I won't necessarily be here. So I'm going to trigger it to go live while I'm away on some time this week. You'll get a notification of it, and you'll be able to see exactly how they did it. JCB will be filming the record attempt. What we've got is all of the footage from RAF Wittering when we went up there for the testing. So, interviews and discussions with the people behind the engines, the body work, the suspension, everything else that goes into it. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, if you have a need for speed, tune in later. Well, tune in next week and you'll be able to see all that. Ken Hatter has just arrived, and Wales is on fire, apparently, along with Spain and France and Italy and parts of the UK. And yes, it's warm. It's warm, and apparently we've got more warm to come. Apparently, when I touch down in Rome, middle of next week, it's around about 34, 35 degrees. Andy Darvell says, that's nothing. You should see the speed the dump trucks do at 5:15 today. Well done, JCB. Yes, nothing quite so fast as a site dumper at knocking off time, is there? Right, let's crack on. We've had a bit of Caterpillar. We need a bit of Takeuchi in our lives, and this is how Eagle swooped down. It was too easy. They're called Eagle. They've got Takeuchis. Obviously, they swooped down.
Nick Barrow, Managing Director of Eagle Plant. Here at Eagle Plant, we offer a wide range of tool hire, plant equipment, welfare and accommodation nationwide. So back in 1997, the directors took the opinion to explore Takeuchi following reliability issues with a couple of suppliers that we're currently using, and that's how the relationship with Takeuchi took place. Reliability and build quality stood out in the early years, and Takeuchi have continued to prove, in our opinion, to be the best machine for our business. Currently at Eagle Plant, we're running over 600 Takeuchi machines, and they are based within 23 depots of the business. So for busy hire firms like us, customer satisfaction and reliability are crucial. Our customers are always pleased to see a Takeuchi turn up on site. The new TB3150 will meet the customer demands for power, reliability and comfort. I'm really pleased to be continuing our relationship with Takeuchi, taking it into its 30th year and taking our new TB3150 delivery today, which is our 1800th machine.
And fair play to them. I had this from Mick. Mick, you made me proud to be British once again. The steam engine, electric motor, telephone, World Wide Web, jet engine, programmable computers, antibiotics, the tank, radar, the hovercraft, and now fantastic JCB. All great British inventions. What warms the cockles of your heart, doesn't it? Really does. I'd much rather do my patriotism based on that than on sporting events where we always fall at the last, or on wars where we're really good at wars, but I really wish we didn't get involved. I'd much rather gather every once in a while and remind ourselves of what Great Britain actually used to mean. Jim Turner has arrived and says, morning peeps, morning Jim. Chris Ford is here as well. Morning Breakman, keep your... Okay, keep your shafts well lubricated and the dryness down. Remember, the wetter the better, the greasier the easier. Are you sure this is entirely appropriate for a plant show? I feel like you borrowed that from somewhere else. Your private life is your own private life. Dan Cullen is here as well, saying, good morning, all you filthy animals, ladies and gentlemen, and plant porn addicts alike. Good morning, Dan. We've got all the usual suspects in the house, apart from Gary Muirhead, as far as I can tell. But then he is up in the Shetlands. He may well be out of contact. So we'll carry on, and hopefully he joins us a bit later on. We're going classic with Bobcat in a moment after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah. Now, I didn't realise this was such a thing, and I realised it's a proven concept. I know Coca-Cola did Coke Classic. Do you remember that a few years ago, where they went back to the original recipe and they sold that as a limited edition? Well, apparently Bobcat have done the same. These are Bobcat Classic Loaders. Classic. Dan Cullen says, bit busy at the moment, but watching for now. Good man, Dan. Don't worry, I'll speak up so you can hear over whatever's going on in the background. Hope you're here for the final bit of today's show, because it does relate, kind of to you. For those of you that don't know, Dan has recently submitted his CV to a company, and he's potentially looking for an interview. We're going to be talking about a bit of that a bit later in the show. And Dan saying, nice, hard to beat an original indeed. Well, bit like yourself, Dan, bit like me as well, an original. They broke the mold and then set fire to it. We're going to be going Kobelco in a moment after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I kind of have to tip my hat, and given that I'm wearing one, there we are, I've tipped my hat to Kobelco Australia. They are probably the most, what's the word? There is a word. I can't think what it is, but they produce more good quality films. I can't think of the word. When somebody writes a lot, No, I can't think of the word. Anyway, Kobelco Australia produce a lot of stuff, and this is one of theirs. Here we go.
G'day, it's Dale McKenna from Melbourne Tractors, just down here at the Suburban Rail Loop with Jerry from Focus Machinery. Just come down to have a look at one of the new 225s that we've just delivered to Focus Machinery. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, mate?
This is obviously a bit of a display of the work where our machines work. Some of these major infrastructure projects, predominantly we've been in Melbourne, but expanding further north over the next little while.
Yep.
With a focus on supplying equipment to civil infrastructure projects requiring a high level of safety and induction compliance requirements.
Yeah, so with that, a couple of the safety features on this machine. So you've got GPS on these machines, tilt hitches. Obviously the Kobelco comes factory with the Eagle Eye camera system.
Yep.
Also fitted payload scales for these, and on these newer ones coming to these sites for the higher safety.
They've got proxy cam, they're human and collision avoidance technology to restrict or warn of anyone walking into the movement area of the excavator.
Yes.
Tight site like this, it's critical to keep it as safe as possible.
Yeah, 100%. If you just have a bit of a look around, there's multiple people, multiple machines in a very tight access job sites. And that sort of innovation with the gear that you're putting on the site will limit that, which is amazing.
Yeah. And I'd like to just say that you coming to us and offering to supply these Kobelcos with the system integrated. Traditionally, we've always bought the machines separate to the technology, but being able to get it all supplied in one order, over 10 machines it'll be, in the 225 size, was a great help and something we hadn't done before. And get something and the day it arrives one day and can go out to work the next day was very beneficial.
It was great to be able to do the machines start to finish as well. Yeah. We can hand the machines over with that teller there to show you through the GPS, because their technicians obviously know that the best out of anyone. I can walk you around the machines and they're ready to be basically pulled straight out of your yard onto a full tier 1 site as well, like we're on right now, which is amazing.
Well, a couple of them literally went out the next day.
Thanks again, mate. Really appreciate the business, and Focus is going great in this realm, and you hire machines, we sell them, so let's all hope for the best for it all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Very good.
Yeah, I did suffer from a bit of a mind fart there, but there we are. Jim Turner says, wasn't the word I was looking for diligent? It wasn't. Consistent does apply, but two people came up with the word I was actually looking for. Mick said prolific. Chris Ford said prolific. Absolutely right. And then Chris says, great minds think alike, Mick, but they tell me fools seldom differ. I'd never heard that part of it, but yes, prolific was the word. Kobelco Australia are very, very prolific in their production of videos, and I'm very grateful for it, because I mean, sometimes I gather the videos in the afternoon or the evening before the show, and then sometimes I literally do it like I've done this morning, where I've literally gone online. Okay, well, I'll have that, and sometimes you kind of have to scratch around, but you can pretty much always go to Kobelco Australia's YouTube channel and find something new, because they are very, very, as the guy said, prolific. Firefighting in a moment after this. Now, the film I'm about to play you is not strictly construction, although the equipment that's involved is construction equipment, or has a construction equipment base. But it set me thinking, this is about firefighting in remote locations. And I think, as a society, we tend to get excited about forest fires and wildfires when they're close to human habitation, for obvious reasons, death, destruction, and all those things. But some of these fires are happening in very remote locations. But it's important to put them out, because obviously they can then encroach on human habitation. But how do you go about putting out a fire that's in the middle of a forest, up a mountain somewhere? Well, you phone Prinoth.
The Forestry Commission protects about 13.6 million acres in the state. We respond to somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 wildfires a year that burn somewhere around 16 to 20,000 acres. South Carolina's got lots of different terrain types. We're in the center of the state now. It's kind of sandy, rolling hills. We do have mountains in a few counties on the North Carolina border, the northern western part of the state. And then on the coast, we have really peat, organic kind of soils. When we get fires that are not in places where the bulldozers are the best tool, right? We have to look for other alternatives. And the Panther machine is a good way for us to get water in the places where we don't have access to water, help support what our guys in the field are doing. Having water at the right place at the right time really helps us do our job better and faster and more efficiently.
When we first started looking at track machines, we realized one of the biggest desires we had was the ability to carry 2 fire personnel in the cab at one time. So the Panther and the GT1200 both had 2-man cabs, and that really sealed the deal on us looking into that purchase. Was we could carry 2 firefighters, they could deploy from the machine and go to the back with 2 hand lines and have both personnel working on the fire at the same time. And I mean, one of my biggest deals about running them is their comfort, the ability of the machine to get where we need it to go in the woods, and the maneuverability, and even just loading it on a truck, you can see what you're doing, and it's very comfortable to drive and operate, and it really does what we want it to do. And a lot of our operators, our firefighters, have been very happy with it, and much happier than they were with an open cab and a loud environment. They can actually hear themselves think and talk to each other inside the cab, and obviously have the air conditioning that makes a big difference in South Carolina.
You see, every silver lining, or every cloud has a silver lining, which is what I meant to say. Obviously, there are concerns about global climate change and the world heating up, and wildfires are apparently now part of everyday life, which is bad for everyone, potentially, apart from Prinoth, who could stand to make a small fortune as a result. There you are. Thank you, Prinoth, for that. That's about it for the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Hope to see you again very soon, Monday and Tuesday, and then I'm gone. So if you want to see me, you've got 2 more opportunities to do so. Mick Norton says autonomous firefighting will be the future. You'd think, wouldn't you? I would imagine that would be quite difficult given the terrain and the presence of trees and everything else. But maybe in inner cities. And Gary Muirhead, I did mention him earlier. He's arrived and he said, "Happy Friday, everyone." Morning, Gary. Thank you for being here. Blade and 3-point linkage on back for cultivator or disc to chop vegetation to create a fire break would make them even more efficient. Well said, Jim. I'd be astonished if the Carolina Fire Department hadn't already thought of that. But hey, listen, what do I know? What do I know? Let's have a bit of morning monologue, shall we? And this is, well, it's kind of aimed at Dan Cullen, but anyone that's applying or has applied for a job and has sensed a bit of imbalance on what you're supposed to reveal about yourself. After this. You sit down at the interview table and hand over a complete history of your working life. You provide a detailed CV accounting for every project you've ever touched since leaving school. You supply CPCS or CSCS card details, proof of qualifications, copies of tickets, and contact details for previous bosses who can verify your competence. If there's a 6-month gap in employment 5 years ago, you're expected to account for it with absolute clarity. And the person sitting opposite you, the other side of the desk, nods, takes notes, and studies you suspiciously. Yet the employer is required to bring absolutely nothing to that same table. They demand total transparency from the candidate while offering zero disclosure about their own institutional history, financial health, or operational culture. It's a curious ritual, particularly in a sector currently crying out for skilled labour. The UK demolition and construction industry is gripped by a well-documented skill shortage. From experienced plant operators and site supervisors to commercial managers and specialist fitters, talent is in high demand. In any standard economic model, a shortage of skilled labour should shift the balance of power toward the worker. The talent should be in a position to set terms. However, the traditional hiring dynamic remains stubbornly one-sided in this industry. An operator is thoroughly scrutinized for their ability to safely handle an excavator, but the company carrying out the contract is under no obligation to disclose their own track record during that introductory handshake. Now think about it. The most serious skeleton in the closet of most demolition and construction workers is they're not particularly punctual. They've been known to dabble with a bit of weekend wacky-backy. They're prone to speaking their mind, or they don't play well with others. The employer, meanwhile, might be a multiple bankrupt, a convicted fraud, or even legally responsible for the injury or death of others. And this imbalance becomes even more pronounced when you look at the huge percentage of self-employed operatives and subcontractors working across UK sites through recruitment agencies. For thousands of people on CIS or working as self-employed trades, the hiring process is often a brief phone call on a Sunday afternoon, followed by a text message telling them where to report at 6 o'clock the following morning. Agency workers are subjected to immediate background checks, ticket validations, and right-to-work verification before they're even allowed near a site gate. Yet those same workers are routinely expected to step blindly onto sites with zero visibility into how that contractor actually treats its workforce. An agency operative or self-employed subcontractor deserves to know precisely what kind of outfit they're walking into. Is this a firm that picks up staff and puts them down again willy-nilly, treating skilled human beings as disposable commodities? Is this an employer with a reputation for off-hiring people at a moment's notice? These surely are critical, practical questions for anyone trying to manage a household budget, pay a mortgage, or plan their family life. And then there's the reality of working conditions. Away from home. A large portion of specialist demolition and heavy earth-moving work requires operatives to live out of a bag for weeks or even months at a time. An employer will happily ask a worker to travel hundreds of miles to stay on a remote job site, but they rarely volunteer honest details about what that actually entails. Does the contractor expect people to work in unnecessarily unpleasant, ill-equipped or degrading site conditions? Do they provide decent, humane welfare facilities, or are workers left with a broken toilet and a cold welfare cabin for a 12-hour shift? What about the accommodation provided for living away? Is it clean, comfortable, fit for purpose, or is it the cheapest, most dilapidated bed and breakfast the commercial team could find? Beyond the day-to-day comfort and job security, there's the crucial question of financial integrity. Does the main contractor actually pay their bills on time? For a self-employed operative or a small subcontractor carrying their own fuel costs, tool maintenance and travel expenses, a late payment is not a minor inconvenience. It's a direct threat to their livelihood. A worker can deliver 30 days of honest, hard labour on a hazardous site, only to find the contractor playing games with pay applications or delaying agency remittances by weeks. In an industry where cash flow is the lifeblood of every worker and every subcontractor, an employer's payment history should be public knowledge before anyone signs a contract or boards a train to a distant site. The list of things a prospective employer can comfortably keep to themselves during the recruitment process is astonishing. They don't have to mention a recent brush with administration or the fact that they've recently risen from the ashes of a collapsed business, leaving local suppliers and subcontractors thousands of pounds out of pocket. They're not required to disclose a history of corporate fraud, bid rigging, or financial irregularities. And perhaps most concerning of all, they don't have to volunteer information about an excessively poor health and safety track record, formal HSE prohibition notices, or site fatalities that have occurred on their watch. If a worker had a track record of reckless behaviour, property damage or gross negligence, they'd be blacklisted or chased off-site within hours. Employers would demand to know every detail of their past failures before offering them another hour of work. Yet a corporate entity with a rap sheet of commercial or safety failures can simply change its trading name and continue recruiting as if their slate was completely clean. The prospective employee is left to play detective on Companies House, scan local news archives, or rely on the industry grapevine to find out if they're about to sign up with a reputable contractor, a sinking financial ship, or an inherently unsafe operator. The fundamental issue here is one of fairness and mutual respect. If the UK construction and demolition sector demands absolute accountability, rigorous compliance, and total transparency from the boots on the ground, then the corporate track record should be laid bare just as plainly and just as transparently. A candidate is expected to prove they're a safe and competent investment for the company before they're handed a hard hat. Surely it's entirely reasonable to ask why that same company is not required to prove that they're safe, solvent, and an ethical investment for their worker. There you are. Struck me yesterday, and I thought, I'm going to pick that up and run with it. That's what we're saying today. Let's have a look. What do we got here? Cheers, Gary. Nice shirt. We used to have wallpaper like that. I'm not sure I'd want to be looking at a lot of this. I mean, thankfully, I don't look down much. I don't get to see this very much, but yeah, I can imagine that could be quite hard on your eyes. A natural progression on plant safety, where machines do the dangerous bits, humans do the thinking. Indeed. Mick Norton says AI can fake competence. It's happening as we speak. Yes, it is. Although, as you know, I am a bit of a student of YouTube and Instagram and stuff, and we are probably 2 years into mass AI consumption, maybe a little bit more, maybe 2.5 years, and the backlash has already begun. The number of people that are openly objecting to the use of AI, and I don't just mean where people are writing articles claiming it as their own when it's clearly AI, which is unforgivable anyway, but even on things like YouTube, there was a big push. We're going to use AI to do this and AI to do that, and there has been a real push back to let's have some proper people talking about this stuff, which I'm very, very pleased about. Dan saying very good monologue. Yes, all relevant and unbelievably true. Thank you. Interviewers are already using AI to analyze profile interviewees. Yes, they are. I heard a thing the other day on a podcast which to say it blew my mind, it blew my mind. There's a guy had been to a conference with providers of databases. I'm sure you all are aware that databases exist. They track your spending profiles and where you live and how old you are you married or are you not? Do you have children? Blah, 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 blah. But there's more depth than that. There was a company at this conference that this guy on the podcast was attending who were offering for sale primarily to credit cards. So this is in America, but primarily to credit card companies, details of dementia patients. In other words, the American Express, Visa, whoever they are, can try to sell their wares with people who are known to be suffering with dementia or some other form of mental illness, which makes them surely more susceptible. And the reason I picked up on it with that is this using AI to analyze and profile interviewees. There was another company, and part of their AI system was to check the background of prospective employees. So partly to check, for criminal records and, misconduct of any kind, partly to do that, but also to check how much they were worth and what not even what they were worth, more a case of what was their financial situation? Because if the AI discovered that somebody was in debt and was therefore more desperate for work, the prospective employer could knock down the amount that they were planning to pay them, decrease their salary, and know that in all likelihood they'll accept the job because they're in dire financial straits. There's a lot about America, not least of which the bloke in the White House, which is horribly and obviously corrupt. But those two examples really made me concerned for humanity. When you are gathering and selling on the open market details of dementia patients so that somebody might be able to sell them a spurious credit card, what kind of scum-sucking fuckwit are you? Just the worst of the worst. Gary Muirhead says, I've just heard about a place here in Glasgow that gives out driving licenses and tickets to immigrants and others for £1,000 without training or test. They're called LBL, Lucky Bag License. I mean, the first part of that, I hate the idea of that. But the second part of it, I'm kind of amused by the name. I mean, I did talk about earlier in the week, actually, about people that look like they got their competence card out of a raffle or a lucky bag. Did anyone remember lucky bags? Were they weren't just called lucky bags, though, were they? They were, God, I'm struggling for words today. I remember that you used to be able to buy a bag in your local newsagents, or your parents would buy it for you, and there'd be a toy in there, a couple of sweets, maybe a comic or something like that. What were they called? I might even shout to my wife in a moment. Jamboree bags. That's what they were called. It came to me. In my scenario, I have to supply my own travel and accommodation for any project I travel away to, which I put into my rate. At least you're protected from, yes, you're sleeping in the shed. I mean, I guess you're protected from that. But again, you're therefore paying up front. You're putting the money up front. Yeah, are you guaranteed to get the money? I mean, the number of times I've heard of people, they've checked the whole crack with, how much am I being paid? What am I getting per hour? Blah, 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 blah. And then they arrive on site, they start work, and they, it gets to Friday. I'm putting in my request. Oh, no. This was just a trial week. Or the other one, which is a real favorite in this industry. Yes, we pay a week from the receipt of invoice, or 30 days from, and so you're already out of pocket, and you're going to be even more out of pocket. If you ask the employer directly about past failures, they might disclose, but usually shy away. Yes. Yeah, and I must admit, I mean, I've been guilty of this. It's a long, long while since I had an interview. Frankly, I wouldn't make it past an interview now. But yeah, I do wonder about that. I mean, all of the interviews, I think most of mine ended up with any questions. And I was so relieved that the interview process was over. I'd go, no, I'm more than happy with that. And then hope and pray that I got the job. But surely that any questions, it should be, yeah. Do you have fraud on your books? Do you have blood on your hands? Is there a culture of sexual misconduct, thievery, fraud, criminal activity? I'd quite like to know what I'm letting myself in for. And okay, I mean, I do realise that some people in this industry are very much nomadic, and they might be with an employer for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then they'll move on. Maybe you're not going to be quite so excited about the background to the company you're about to work for. But if you're applying for a permanent position in this industry, you'd kind of like to know that the people you're working for are trustworthy, that they're not fraudulent, that they're not bigoted, or and bearing in mind, we are increasingly talking about the next generation of plant people and plant operators. Those coming up through the ranks now will probably have pretty clear and probably vocal views on all things to do with sustainability and climate change. If you are a demolition or construction company and you're claiming, commitment to environmental stewardship, great. Can you back it up? Is it a lie? Is it just something you put on your website or your company brochure, or are you actually doing that? I think the generation, my generation, probably wouldn't give a monkeys about that by and large. But if you're 18, 19, 20 years old and, you are seeing the damage that your parents' generation and their parents' generation did to the damage they did to the planet, then maybe that is a really important consideration for you. How honest are they being, I wonder? Jim Turner says, when I have the crack with a potential employer, it's in order for both sides to ask questions and weigh each other up. I had it a few times when I've been offered the job but turned them down because it didn't seem good enough. A few companies seemed quite miffed that I wasn't taking them up on their offer. What they hadn't realised was I was also interviewing them. Yeah. And again, I mean, I say this to Jim quite a lot. I think that's one of those things that is great if you have the experience and if you also have something else to fall back on. I mean, Jim is of the type that he's never likely to find himself out of work for more than about 10 minutes flat. Because he's a veteran of the industry. He knows people. He's respected for what he does. But if you're on your way up, that notion of interviewing each other, I'm not sure. I don't think, maybe I'm atypical, or maybe I'm not the norm, but I don't remember ever thinking I had the right to interview my prospective employer. I was generally so intent on giving a good impression, trying not to swear unless I really needed to, trying to mind my P's and Q's. I don't think I ever actually asked a proper probing question, which is bizarre given what I do for a living. Dan says, it's unbelievable. I remember I asked a question about a company to the CEO. He said, why are you asking that? I said, well, you want me to work for you. I want to understand how your company works and treats the workforce. Hence to say, I didn't get the job because he asked the questions. Yeah, I don't know. We've got another couple of comments here. We've got one from Mick and one from Gary. I'll come to those in a moment. But has anyone tried to sell a property recently? And I am going somewhere with this. You are required now, if you're selling a property on the open market, you are required to produce at cost, I think it's about 400 quid, a seller's pack. Yeah. Like documentary proof that you don't have any subsidence. Your heating system is up to regs. You haven't built an illegal conservatory on the back of your house. You've had your gas system checked, your electricity system checked, and so on down the line. You're required to present that, bearing in mind you hold the cards in all other aspects, but you're expected to provide all of that. Should we not have that for prospective employers? You go along, I'll bring my CV and my cards and my certificates and my details of my competence, but you show me your employer's pack, what you've been up to over the last 2 or 3 years. Because I think it's important information. What if, says Nick, what if a prospective employer illegally exposes prospective employee when she is hired into a role where fraud is ongoing and they don't tell you? Well, yeah, quiet. I mean, one thing I would say with fraud is that responsibility does tend to flow almost entirely upwards. But yeah, even if you're not legally implicated in fraud, but if you're welcomed into a company where fraud is taking place, and maybe the project that you've been hired for was won on a fraudulent basis, A, do you want to be associated with that? And B, could you turn up for work one Monday morning and find the Rozzers there closing it all down because they've discovered the fraud that's taken place? Yeah. Gary said, this 30-day payment term is a joke. After they say there's a dispute with it and they make you wait another 30 days. I'm sure someone told me that in Sweden they get paid out on a weekly basis. Sweden and Norway just do things right, don't they? I mean, I've got a situation at the moment. Bearing in mind, when was Samota? May? I think it was May. We did some work. I'm not going to name them because it's in their payment terms. I'll come to that in a second. But we did some work with the company back in May. It's now August and we haven't been paid yet. And the reason for that, we agreed to work with them and for them in advance. They wanted to know, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. They wanted to know who we were, what we did, how much it would cost, where we would produce their videos, how we would show it. Would it be on here? Would it be on YouTube? Would it be on Instagram? All of which were the case. So they wanted the ins and outs of a duck's ass, as my dad used to say. So we gave all of that to them. And then we submitted the invoice. And we were sent a form back to say, no, but in order to be accepted, you need to fill out this preferred suppliers form, which we did. They then sent us another one that said, okay, you're on the list now. We need to provide you with an order number. Here is your order number. Now, can you please resubmit your invoice? We put the order number on the invoice, we resubmitted it, and we received another email that said our standard terms are 60 days from receipt of invoice. So work was done in May. The invoice was issued in May, or the original invoice was issued in May, but because of the fanning and the farting around, here we are in August, still not been paid. So this is not, don't get out the violins. We're okay, but this is not just a construction company to construction worker. This is rife in the industry. In 1994, says Nick, I was interviewed for a senior health and safety post and was asked to seat myself centrally in an empty room while the interviewer circled around me asking inane questions. Good Lord. I walked out, he says. Well, as well you might. That sounds more like an interrogation to me. I do. I may have mentioned this before, but it's one of those things. I mentioned earlier about there are times when you are desperate not to laugh, and I would say an interview is one of those. You're desperate not to laugh, but your body is saying, I'm going to make you laugh. So back in the day when I first applied to work at a publishing company, this was back in the days of uni and closed shops. So basically it was sort of one out, one in. You tended to get favourable treatment if you were a family member of somebody that was already in there, or if you knew the person that had done the job before. Well, it turns out I got myself on the books of my old employer, Reed Business Publishing. And, I was willing to take any job just to get in there so that I could then move up and around. Anyway, got a phone call from an old girlfriend, not a girlfriend, but a girlfriend, who said that she was working there and she was basically moving on and her job was up for grabs. So I applied for it. Got an interview. So I phoned her up. Maxine, her name was. I phoned her up and said, thanks for that, Max. I've got myself an interview. And she said, who's interviewing you? I said, it's a guy called Mike Beavis. I hope he's not watching. Probably not. It's a guy called Mike Beavis. And she said, he's fine. Look out for his eye. I said, what? No. And she said, no, you'll be fine. Just look out for his eye. And she hung up. So there we are. A couple of weeks later, I've arrived, suited and booted, CV under my arm, walked into the office, and in walks Mike Beavis, who has a glass eye. And I couldn't take my eyes off his eye. The joke is he rolled his eye at me, so I picked it up and rolled it back. That's not true. That didn't happen. But when I'm going off beam. I'll come back in a second. Chris and Jim, who've got some stuff to say. I went to Norway with Caterpillar years ago, early 90s, to interview a customer who bought a bunch of Caterpillar wheel loaders. And on the drive there, the guy from the Caterpillar dealer up there said, before you go in, you need to be aware the guy you're about to interview has had a hair transplant. Don't mention it because he's quite sensitive about it. I'm just warning you in advance. And we went in there. Well, this guy's head looked like a freshly ploughed field. You could see between the tufts of hair. There's these perfectly straight rows from front to back. Yeah, I don't think I asked a sensible question. Just looked at this fella's head and he's strange Barnet. Gary says, have to go now, guys. Have a fantastic weekend and a relaxing weekend as well. Thanks, Gary. You too, my friend. I hope to see you Monday, Tuesday. If not, I'll see you when I get back. Going back to Chris Ford, never mind selling a piece of land. Try buying some. The hoops they want you to jump through, and God help you if you needed to borrow the money for a small acreage of bare ground. Yeah. Oh, listen, we've been put through the ringer. When my parents died, they left me some money, not a huge amount, but they left me some money, and we applied to try and buy a place, and literally had to prove, I had to have written solicitor statements to prove that I'd inherited the money, that I hadn't just laundered it from some terrorist organization. Unbelievable. Jim Turner says, working for someone is a partnership, not serfdom. Well said, sir. No one owns or controls me. I do I do as they ask because they're paying me to, and they are complying with pre-agreed rules. Fair play. Can't argue with that. Back in the day, says Mick, a squaddy I knew, desperate to get his CV noticed, always attached a live goldfish in a plastic bag to each job application. Good Lord. I mean, it would get you noticed. We had a guy back when we had an office down in Tenterden in Kent. We needed an office manager. There's two stories here, and I'll come back to the other part in a second. We had an office up in Chertsey in Surrey, but my former partner moved down to Tenterden, so we decided to move the office down there because it was cheaper and more convenient for him. I'll come back to the Chertsey office in just a moment. But we needed an office manager down in Kent, and we, put an advert in the local paper, got an agency on board, and they went out and found some people. And we had a bunch of people sending us letters and CVs, and the one that stood out was the guy we ended up employing, who basically said, I can do this, I can do that, experience with this, experience with that, and I make a fantastic cup of tea. And we invited him in for an interview, and I jokingly said, I understand you make a decent cup of tea. And he went, do you want one? Yeah, go on then. And he went off into the corner, boiled the kettle, and he did make a fantastic cup of tea. Got the job. Barry, his name was. But going back to Chertsey, we went out to the market. We needed an office manager for that facility. And we went out to the market, and we ended up whittling it down to two women. One of the women was like Miss Jean Brodie, very austere and very serious, quite, I was going to say old. She was probably in her 50s, but, very serious, proper school mom type. And the other one was probably about 25 and basically a supermodel. She had the lot. She had, as the kids say, it was all going on. She had the full package. So we interviewed both of them. Obviously, two blokes interviewing both of them. So when the interviews were over, we sat there and both of us went, "For." And then we went down the pub and said, okay, so, two good candidates. Who do we employ? And the person we chose was the school mum because, we needed an office manager, not some eye candy. Yeah. Jim Turner saying, Barry the Brew. Yeah, we should have called him that. Guys, I am going to have to love you and leave you because my phone is ringing and it's my doctor. So I'm going to love you and leave you. I'll see you on Monday. Mark Anthony.